Hi everyone. Welcome. My name is Pastor Rasky and I am a member of the board of the LA Forum. We are here this evening to join in the conversation and the presentation of Transect of Coexistence, Inquiry into Nature, Art, and Habitat, a book recently published by Nature, Art, and Habitat Residency, or NAHR. NAHR is an eco-laboratory of multidisciplinary practice located in the Toledo Valley near Bergamo in Italy, and with an outpost in Santa Ynez Valley, California. NAHR explores nature's insights as a source of inspiration and as a measure of impact on resources. Their goal is to uncover intimate links between all living organisms to support resilient development where humans and nature can successfully coexist. I'd like to briefly introduce Ilaria, Maristella, Deborah, and Richard from NAHR, and Gia, who will be moderating the conversation. Ilaria Mazzoleni is an architect, educator, author, and NAHR founder. Her research focuses on sustainability and biomimicry, where innovation in architecture and design is inspired by the processes and functions of nature. Maristella Casciato is an architect and architectural historian. She has been Senior Curator, Head of Architectural Collections at the Getty Research Institute in Los Angeles. Deborah Weintraub is the highest ranking architect for the city of LA and the Chief Deputy City Engineer. And Richard Molina is an educator and the design director of Animal. He's a lecturer in the Department of Architecture at Cal Poly Pomona and a faculty member in the School of Theater at Cal Arts. And Gia, who will be moderating the discussion, is an architecture scholar, curator, and designer working on histories of knowledge production through the lens of media studies, cultural techniques, and material cultures. She's assistant professor of architecture at Harvey Mudd College and one half of the Architecture and Research Studios in Aggie. Special thanks to Metabolic Studio for hosting this event, and Lauren Wan, who has the studio, will say a few words about where we are right now.
Hello. I first would like to acknowledge that we're on Tongva, Gabrielino, and Keach land. I've been here working on this land for 20 years, since not a cornfield. 2005 is the 20th, it will be 20 years since I planted the first seeds on what is today the LA State Historic Park. At that time, the park had been an abandoned train yard for nearly 70 years. It was an abandoned train yard because the train yard was built on top of a floodplain. So, not a great idea if you will have lots of people coming and going from a place that's constantly flooding. So after about 25 years, the trains moved to Union Station, and Chinatown moved from one place to the place it's in, but that site was left pretty much desolate and abandoned, and factories came around it. And so what we do here as a studio practice is think about ways, how can you make a floodplain again? What can you do to bring back the complexity when cities often grind complexity to all too simple algorithms like flood control? So the current project of the Metabolic Studio, Bending the River, is a project that's been going on since Not a Cornfield. During Not a Cornfield, I would take a water truck down to the LA River, fill it up with water, and attach it to 90 miles of irrigation stripping, until I was told by the LADWP that that's illegal. And the reason it's illegal is because of liability. Not because it doesn't make good sense to take stormwater and spread it onto brownfields, but because there's things like E. coli and other things you don't want to spread around. It's illegal because of liability. So Bending the River has gotten more than 100 networked permits from the U.S. Army Corps, from the city, from the state, in order to take a small portion of the LA River and clean it in this warehouse before we distribute it. But we've waited so long that now they're thinking they'll build a gondola on the state park. Begging the question of, does this make any sense at all? I don't know. So that's what we try and do to figure out here, and we're very happy to highlight these things. Hopefully some of you architects can come along and help us figure out what's worth doing and what's not worth doing. We are open on Tuesdays for tours of our undevelopment project, which is turning 15,000 square feet of warehouse just over outside the parking into a new bed for the river and cleaning the lead out of the ground that used to be part of Standard Oil, and they just buried underneath the concrete floors here. So don't stay here too long because you'll be sucking up the lead that's buried underneath here, which is why this building is zoned for light storage and not a school. All right, I'll stop here so that I don't end up giving a lecture, but if you'd like to come Tuesday at 11:30 for a tour, and then we serve lunch afterwards, and I'll hand this back to you. Welcome to the studio. Okay, everyone, please join us.
Hi, Gia. Apologies in advance, I lost my voice, so I'm very opportune moment of facilitating this conversation. So we'll just get a very deep, really fire today. I'm so pleased today to be facilitating this conversation. Jose did my job, so everybody knows who everybody on this panel is. And we could begin with an overview of NAHR from Ilaria, who founded NAHR about 10 years ago, and we'll follow that with 3 pools of thought that we have gathered together to develop. Would you like to take the mic, Ilaria? I think this is a good one.
Okay, now it works, right? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Jose, the LA Forum, Lauren, and the Metabolic Studio, and everyone that is here tonight. I'm going to introduce, I don't know, I feel that I should stand up. I don't know, sorry. No, just now for a second, I guess.
Ciao, Ilaria.
As you can hear, some are already old friends here, but thank you also for the new friends that have come from far and near. So I'm going to give you an introduction a little bit about the book. Tonight is the celebration of this publication that marks the 10th anniversary of our nonprofit. And in a way, it's a good coincidence because Pacific Standard Time is around, and even though we are not really connected with the programming, definitely the spirit of NAHR coincides greatly with the Getty Pacific Standard Time edition. And so I think most of us would be very flexible in understanding the connection between science and creativity, I think. The title, where I want to start from is really the cover and the title of our book, Transect of Coexistence, and the interest that we have been taking over the years to kind of merge the boundaries between the silos, between disciplines, and also between or among different living organisms, where we understand that if we all want to thrive on this ecosystem that is Earth, we should coexist among ourselves, but also among other organisms. And so the idea of coexistence is very broad, is a socially and environmental take on this intertwining and interconnectedness that we have. And why a transect? A transect is because we don't want to look at things just as they appear to us, but go in depth, and often in field research, we look at things in a more analytical way. We cut sections in many of our professions, so there is the idea also of sectionality and dissection And the transect is really a broad overlook at the elements above and below us in a way. So the book is really a broad overview of that, and it inquires nature, art and habitats, where in habitat we include not only our context, but the humans, but also the non-living organism. The organization of the book is that at NAHR, which is, as Jose briefly introduced, a place in a specific location in northern Italy, in the Italian Alps and in the Santa Ynez Valley. Now we look at every year at the element of nature, one at a time. So the 6 chapters of the book are looking at 6 elements of nature, such as water, soil, etc. And I'm taking you a little bit through the organization of the book. Hopefully you bought it, or you will buy it, or you will borrow it and read something about it. But the book is organized in these 6 chapters, and every chapter has the same structure. There is an essay that looks at issues from a global perspective. I make the example of the woods, the forest. We can look at how deforestation and urban forestry are an issue at a large scale, and we can all relate to. But then also sometimes when we go to in depth and we look from a local perspective at issues, we see that the big idealistic strokes take a different perspective. And it's the case of the woods, where in the Alps, due to the movement of population, we have issues of reforestation. So how we reconcile the ideals that we have at the global level, or these understandings or these conversations, when we look at the global versus then when we are immersing ourselves in a specificity that the book tries to do with the second essay in each chapter. And the third essay is reflections by people that have been at NAHR, involved at NAHR. We call them the fellows. And those people have spent a certain amount of time either in northern Italy or in Santa Ynez Valley. And there are snippets of their thoughts, of their work. Since it's a place of ideation, often the work is more a beginning stage of the work that is shown. So we have been trying to give a sense of what NAHR provides as a platform for experimentation. And that the structure repeats 6 times, with some introductions, of course, that frames better what our outlook, that is really facing the climate crisis with a positive outlook, or a propositive outlook. As creative people, what can we do? How can we take the challenges of today and think to work with them and propose ideas to outcome, or to shift a little bit the needle? Is a big proposition, of course, but that's a little bit what we are trying to look at this, and for the reader also to have an idea or suggestions of how to go about the moment in time in both a creative and a scientific way. So how did we get here? I think that's one of the key points of our book. In a way, you may have seen the cover as 9 names, the pictures on the left, and those are the 9 editors that have been dedicating a couple of years of their Saturday mornings to the idea of the book. And then we have about 100 contributors, 12 authors for the 6 chapters, and about 90 fellows that have been contributing. And we have been really working all together in doing this. And it's a very important point to make of how collaborative our space has been, even though we are from 22 different countries. So we are really dispersed from Australia to Canada, across many, many countries. And sorry, in the previous slides, I didn't mention it. In addition to these people that I already broadly mentioned, we had a foreword that was a special invitation of Malena Martinez from Lima, Peru. And also the cover design that you have seen is by April Grayman, who is sitting here with us. And she has been a fellow at our residency in the Year of the Rock with other friends that later will be mentioned. But April also kindly agreed to do our cover that really represents in many ways who we are or try to be. So thank you, April, for that. And I think this was my last slide. No, yes, in going with the acknowledgements, actually, maybe. There are many people always that makes a book. I mentioned the people that really contributed directly between words or with their images, but then there are a lot of institutions and supporting elements, especially locally. When you go to a place, you need people that help you to organize the dinners, and but they are all critical, especially when you are in a village of 80 humans, 80. So it's really quite a small reality that you have to include everyone to make things happen, and everyone is really important. And so the spread really talks to that. And my closing is actually next slide. A special thank again to the LA Forum and Jose, who has been also part of NAHR for a few years, and everyone else that tonight are here to help us, Donatella, etc. To Metabolic Studio again, to Gia, who kindly agreed to moderate the panel. And there are a bunch of you in the public that has been at NAHR, participated, wrote an essay. We have someone that is gonna drive coming from all the way from Italy as an essayist that happened to be in the Grand Canyon. He's a soil scientist. So it's really, this is the magic of some happening sometime. We want also to mention our host in the Santa Ynez Valley, Sarah Graham and Mark Angelin, where we stay at the ranch. And April, I just mentioned earlier. So, and everyone else that is here tonight, thank you again. And I'm giving it back to Gia. Thanks. There are a couple of seats here, if anybody would like to sit, actually.
Thank you. So, in this evening, thinking through the conversation, it was important for Ilaria and the group to reflect on the distinction of NAHR as a very site-specific residency taking place far, far away in Maristella, Italy, in which many different people have different forms of access and embodied experiences with the site, but also the idea that the book, I'm so sorry, the book is not meant to be a documentation only of what's happened in the residency, but itself an intellectual reflection of the ideas and topics that have driven NAHR for 10 years around 6 key themes. The 3 speakers joining Ilaria and myself today, each were editors of a particular section of the book, and will have different perspectives. But just to kind of contextualize the intentions of the conversation, I'd like to think about this. I'm going to start with a very open question, which is to ask each of you to share how you were introduced to NAHR, how you became involved, and lessons you may have taken away from the production of the book. And maybe Deborah,
Yeah. So my introduction, yes. My introduction to NAHR was many years ago. Ilaria and I met around issues of sustainability, and then we sort of lost track of each other. And we got back together when she approached me to come to the Valparaiso to talk about water and water policy and water use and water infrastructure in California. And it was fascinating to me to come to the small valley and really see the origins of some of the infrastructure we see here at very early scale, very small scale, but it's really in some sense no different than the scale that we operate at here. the excitement about it, for me, that really person getting involved with NAHR was the multitude of voices who attend the workshops, are there as fellows, who bring perspective from lots of different disciplines. I learn every time I'm involved with a NAHR event, and since we're all lifelong learners, I really appreciate these various perspectives.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Maristella. Actually, I am the editor of the section the chapters that opens the book, words. But I'm not, in the field of landscape or others. I am an architectural historian, and so, more than that, I am a curator right now at the Getty, but have been curating and thinking of what does it mean to allow yourself to be conscious of what's happening around you and learn from all the experience. So in 2016, I accepted my position at the Getty, and I am here. Not any longer as a professor of architectural history, but I have to deal with archive. And to me, the idea of the archive means that I scratch into documents, I go to diverse sources, I build puzzles, I put knots together, and for me, this is my curiosity that drives every day what I do. And so this is not only because we are both Italian, that at a certain moment, through a series of dots that I put together, I met Ilaria. We are from Italy, but we are from very different reality. I come from a metropolitan area, and Valtaleggio is one of these incredible environment where you measure with your body both yourself and the nature, yourself and the universe, yourself and what is around you. And so when I was, in this discussion, it's true, we spend every single Saturday morning, either 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, in a Zoom meeting. And you feel so taken by this, routine, that if, as all of us, if sometimes you are not there, you really pay attention to inform the others. And the others can be everywhere in the world. Our friend from Turkey, from Italy, from Australia, Latin America. So every Saturday, it's a different globe for us. So, and with the idea of this, curiosity, Maristella looking at sources, my subjectivity of being really curious. When Ilaria said, Maristella, we really would like to have you as an editor of Woods, in a certain way I found, something that appealed to me probably more than all the other elements. And why? First of all, I grew up spending the summertime in a tiny village than Valtaleggio, with woods around me. And my perspective has been always, this is my wood, but there is much more. There are the forests, there are the large components of the globe. What does it mean to engage with this? And so if, for instance, you read my chapter, the introduction, I always go as I am. Looking for significance of the word. What is a wood? What is a forest? Where is the origin? Where is the history again? Because I put myself into NAHR. Not only NAHR into me, but myself into NAHR. And this has been the exchange of, I arrived in 16, so it's almost, the same anniversary than NAHR has been so far. And it's an endeavor, it's a process, it's a path together, and it's also a lot of fun. Thank you.
I think the necessity
for the book, maybe I go to that for me was that comes from NAHR, but is really the idea of sharing some of the thoughts with a broader group of people that might have interest in bridging the science knowledge with the creative worlds. And it's something that being a metabolic studio is, again, seems obvious, but it's not as often the case. And when we started speaking about doing the book, I felt that was the next step that was necessary. NAHR was born because I've been working on sustainability and caring about the environment for so many years, but we always were in a conference room with air conditioning and artificial lighting to talk about nature. And I thought, well, maybe we should be out in nature to talk about nature. And that's, I have this place in this particular valley is as good as many other places in the world, but let's meet there and see where it goes. So we started offering what we had, and with the book, then this offering is going from the locality of 2 places in the world to a broader discourse. So the ambition of the book is that, yes, it's connected locally to some place, but it also touches us for the broader discourse of how important in our daily action, whatever we are doing, that we really consider our impacts and how our creative minds, as architects, we always project, right? We always design something. Everything we do is a thought that is about designing, and I hope that the book is a place where to think further and to invite others to collaborate in making what we have better for everyone. I think Richard is busy to get the slides working for us. So this is a goat. His name is Mose. There was a photographer. There is a photographer from Mexico City, Patrick, who came and stayed for a month, and every morning he would walk for an hour to meet a cow, and then later in the afternoon meet a goat, and take portraits photographs to show the individuality of each of us beyond the human. Now, Richard.
Sorry about that, little technical difficulty. So my name is Richard Molina, and over the years, Ilaria and I have actually collaborated on many research projects and projects as well. And I think I naturally was just brought into NAHR as well. So it's something that I also, I think, contend with in how I think about the impacts in architecture and the kind of direction that we need to take as well in how we need to kind of attribute some of these aspects into the way that we think about how we build our world around us, so the built environment, but also the natural world, and not to neglect that part of it. And so I think that these are small ideas that I think come into my own work, my own practice in a very meaningful way. And so those are the kind of trajectories that I take from NAHR, from the issues of environmental qualities and how we sort of kind of engage those things. And so I think my relationship with NAHR really kind of exists with that, and I really enjoy the whole aspect of the interconnected quality and reaching out to other disciplines in our own cultures to really kind of reflect upon these different ideas and different methodologies about how we approach design in general, both in the creative arts, but also in the sciences, and how those really kind of bind themselves, and I think is integral to our own, I think, progress. And so I think NAHR has really started to kind of work in that way, at least in my mind, and it's something that is really, I think, quite painted elegantly in the book. And I think this is something that we use as a way to also reflect upon all of these ideas and where we've come in the kind of trajectory that NAHR has taken over the years, and kind of celebrating those 10 years, but also looking back at the collection of the work that's been produced by the fellows, but also our own input and our own thoughts of going through and constantly creating these calls for the projects that we are looking for and the type of relationship that we want to establish within our communities, but also abroad as well. And so I think I had a bigger hand with NAHR when COVID hit, and we actually had to go through and think about different ways of starting to engage our community, where we didn't have the chance to really connect with them physically. You know, I think NAHR was closed during that time as well, so there was no residency, but we still wanted to kind of open it up to others and create the conversations with everybody. So we actually went through and did a bunch of webinars, a bunch of online conversations with also different fellows. We reached out to fellows before and really started to kind of reconnect with them and see where they're at and how they started to kind of go through and redevelop a lot of their work as well. So it's been quite an interesting endeavor for me to kind of look back and reflect on that and look through the archives of NAHR and really kind of reestablish, you know, NAHR's agency in what we're doing. And so I think that that's something that we could all take in, you know, I think wholeheartedly, and it's been a really useful resource for me. And I really thank Ilaria for always inviting me to work on these projects and continue the research that we've always done for the many years.
Thank you. You know, we're here in Los Angeles. We know where we are. Valparaiso is a place that's seemingly far. I didn't even make that rhyme. But I would love to think about that relationship between the two sites and how knowledge transfers or what kinds of knowledge transfers are possible between two locales. And for me, learning about NAHR's work as a residency and as an institution with a certain proposition about how different forms of knowledge come together and how you would potentially share knowledge, I'm curious if there are ways that Los Angeles' own histories of land-adjacent or site-specific projects and organizations, the Center for Land Use Interpretation, Metabolic Studio, High Desert Test Site, I think Michael Heiser, different artistic projects that have found very either research-based approaches to what we might call nature or land or space or site, or different ways of articulating ideas beyond singular works, let's say. I'd love to think about that, and then I would love to also know what we can learn from Valparaiso and what carries over from a site of 80 people, but maybe processes or organizational models or consciousness that's not possible in the rush city that we live in. Maybe I'll invite Richard just to shake it up. Yeah.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, it's a lot to take in that question. But I think in relating back to Los Angeles, I think it was interesting during the soils topic that we had a scientist, a fellow that came on board, Danielle Stevens, and she was doing some research actually on polluted landscapes, landfills, essentially, and the effect that has on different cities, because at some point it starts to kind of deplete, it turns into dust, and it starts to kind of flow into other regions within its environment. So it has quite an impact on how it also, I think, affects areas around it. And I think this point of view is quite interesting from a scientific point of view, but I think also in contributing to the kind of creative arts as well, because it gives us a different way of looking at our landscapes and what it is that we see and how we go through and investigate them. So she's going through and trying to figure out ways to revitalize those areas and see how you could start to, figure out methods to really kind of reconstruct the way that you're starting to kind of decrease the pollution that is being contributed by that. So it's quite engaging with what she was doing, the research that she's doing, but it's also a way to kind of start to look at how we zoom, as scientists as well, or in different disciplines, how you zoom into certain elements within nature and start to look at them, very specifically or from a different point of view, and you really start to kind of reflect on what abilities they have and what impacts they have, but also starting to figure out different solutions to really kind of create a different type of environment that reconstructs, I think, these methods that they're really starting to kind of go through and figure out their own operations. And so I think in that respect, just looking here, and she's also from Riverside, she was also in school at that time, but there was a way that really started to kind of connect with our landscapes that we see here that we don't always engage with just because we're in our urban environments and we only see the cities that we go to, we see the grocery store that we go to. So it's a kind of a different point of view, the things that are like tucked behind our eyes in a way we just constantly neglect just because we don't see them quite readily. And I think that that's something that is quite engaging to really, I think, reflect on and also see how that's also in a way connected to placing yourself in Valtallegio as well, because there you're actually embedded in nature, you're immersed in it, and you're starting to look at those things that exist around you. So here it's a different kind of characteristic. It's a very serene area. It's not that you see like all of the pollution there or everything that you see in our everyday lives, but it puts you in a kind of different world. And I think that also kind of engages a different mentality of how you start to think about these things and put yourself back into nature and see those resources as possibilities to also extract from and continue that development in a different way or different format that I think is also relevant to the way that you're thinking about these things.
I don't know that I relate so much my perspective, the work I've done in LA to art pieces. I certainly know them, but and focusing on the chapter I've worked on, which is water. From the work I do with the city, I think I drive around the city and the region, and I've had the opportunity to start to deconstruct the city three-dimensionally and to understand how water gets here, where water goes when we're done with it, the issues of contamination of the soil, which is, we have a lot of contaminated soil here. So the relationship between LA and its vastness is really, it's a pretty short time that the city built up. I mean, you look at pictures from 100 years ago, and it was really rural. So there's a pretty interesting connection to go to a place like the Valtallegio and then to think about areas that were rural or were native and had a lot of wildlife and how that transformation happened and what we have to do to provide the infrastructure to support life here. And then where you integrate, people and animals, or how poorly we integrate people and animals to provide coexistence. So the art pieces explore kind of particular aspects, and I've worked with Lauren for close to 20 years too, because she needed permits from the city, and I was a sympathetic voice, so I helped her get through some of the 100 permits that she refers to, and I will just say, all of our projects, we do all those permits as well. But it's a process, it's mind-numbing at times, very bureaucratic. But I just have been fortunate to think at a big scale, how should our sewer system be built? How should it be rebuilt? What do we do with reclaimed water? What can it be used for? What shouldn't it be used for? How do we rethink the streets? The streets, it was interesting to me to realize that streets are probably one of our major methods for dealing with stormwater. I never thought about that. That little 6-inch curb keeps all of our properties from flooding. And so when you don't have curbs, the residences will flood. So it's not the art pieces so much, it's like the building of the city. Now, so I do reflect on how I might have done it differently. And certainly we're going to densify because we need more housing. But I still drive around the city and I go to neighborhoods that I've never been to because we're 250 square miles. So I'll drive into an area where we have a project and think, oh my God, I've never been here. We do have a really rich variety of, we're predominantly single family homes. We have a really rich variety of single-family residential neighborhoods. Some of those are probably important to preserve as we densify, and we have to continue to provide a means of life for all of these residents, i.e. clean water, sewer systems, stormwater systems, power. All of that is the world that I've been fortunate to participate in, and it's been fascinating. That's enough.
This is too much stuff. Excellent idea. Well, you heard, I mean, among these four architects sitting here and GL5, I mean, I think that Deborah is the one who is more involved, I mean, because of her life, her daily life, to deal with Los Angeles and the diversity and the problems and so on. I basically spend my day on top of the hill, very far. I mean, it does rain. We don't get flooded usually. Fire is a bit more a problem. Fire is one of our topics, by the way. But I found the Gia question. I mean, we have discussed this among us with her, and since we discussed, I've been thinking, what do I have to answer? I mean, what does it mean for me? First of all, it means that if you are in Los Angeles, you think, okay, I can be global, wide, large, I mean, the extension of the city and so on. But I can also find myself, if I hike, in a little place. I mean, and I'll be in an environment that I can think of it, it's the scale of my body, and I'll be alone, like if I go to Valtaleggio and I get one of the path and then I get lost. I mean. So, I mean, it also depends from your perspective. I mean, I cannot say that I have the perspective of Deborah. I mean, because she really deals with the crisis or not, whatever happens with the city. But I think that from each of us perspective, we can find ourselves. Because, I mean, nature, rural, I mean, those are, conditions that I can, always find, and not because I'm here in Los Angeles or I find myself back home in Roma or in Valtaleggio. Yesterday night, after our conversation, I decided, let me start to find declination of nature and culture. Okay, the first one that came on my mind after the conversation was nature, city, rural. I mean, metropolis and rural. Are they only oppositional, or I can find a shared declination? I mean, those are ideas. The other one was issue of ecosystem. The ecosystem is delicate in Los Angeles, of course. It's a crisis. But it's not that the Valtaleggio is an island of miracle or something else. Not at all. I mean, so again, the ecosystem it's an issue of scale. Where I look at that, I mean, at the metropolitan scale or the local scale. Here, the idea of the local and the global of the book. The other issue was nature and humans. Of course, I feel myself, I mean, we are all human, but there are many different kinds of humanity. I mean, the humanity of, the social classes, the people who live in different conditions. I mean, but the 80 people in Valtaleggio, it's not that they live in an isle of miracle. They have the same problems, similar, maybe different scale, but I don't even think so. Poverty is poverty everywhere, or conditional limitation are everywhere. So it's very much again, you gave me this idea yesterday of my own subjectivity. I think that geographies can be related when I think about who is the person who is who is me. I relate and how I do this. So at the end of the evening yesterday, because at the beginning I was a bit like afraid, panicking, what is this, and so on. No, I like Michael Hauser. It's fantastic. But I have to relate to his landscape. In Nevada, where is he now? His city. So if I measure me, and that's something that comes also from NAHR. NAHR always thinks that the human, their body, are part of this conversation without thinking that there is one geography that belongs to us. We relate to all the geographies. This is what came to me.
I should apologize because I wasn't even thinking about the artworks. It wasn't for me. The question wasn't about the pieces or the works. It was about the ways in which artistic practice has expanded beyond an object and has been situated in either social art, thinking about social art practice or research-based practices and the ways that has also been transferred over. I say transfer over just suggesting that Ilaria is bringing it over to top, but I'm sure it's more complicated than that. But just, I see a lot of proximity to how the residents and fellows have been working in Valtallegio and the modes of production that are possible in that residency space as people are thinking through the very specific thematic ears, soil, critical zone, for example, and the embrace of the abundance of modes of working that you are invited into the. So I was not really thinking about the artwork, but really thinking about the, that multiplicity. And we'll get to this a little bit later, but, and I'm sorry if you had more to say about
No, maybe just to reinforce what you are mentioning now, in a way, I don't position it I don't just position the two places. It doesn't matter the size and the distance in a way. I see it much more fluid because of the intellectual positioning, and at the same time, because we are in an era where we are starting conceiving, and after COVID more, that the center and the periphery are more relative. It doesn't matter anymore so much to live in a city, to have access to the same intellectual stimuli, because most of us, maybe because I'm getting old, but in the evening I stay home and I look at my phone instead of going to a museum. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it's just as a provocation. But I feel that this idea of rural and slow and different has been changing rapidly, even though more and more people are moving to live in urban environments. But the benefit of positioning ourselves outside of the urban environment from time to time is that as soon as we live in a small place where our priorities were to walk, should I walk uphill first or downhill first? And not should I go shopping for this and that and that and that. Is a change in mind and pace that often at residencies that are a place for thinking and pondering, it happens. So it becomes a very intimate moment for the people that choose to do a residency, no matter what. But in a place where nature is foregrounded, that becomes our embodied experience of being in nature the priority. And we lessen our cultural, intellectual processes of understanding the world as we do more, I feel, at least personal, in an urban environment. We try to understand nature from sitting down and looking it through our screen instead of taking a hike in the cold, in the rain, in the heat, and embracing that challenge. Being in urban or rural, I'm not sure, but that's the shift that we are trying to provoke. And those experiences, artistic experiences, I think have some similarities in that shift.
That's great. Maybe to kind of wrap us, kind of close us out tonight, I was thinking a lot about the book and the many ways we are existing in a world where we're seeking a relationship relationship with nature that is defined by different notions of care. And I was also reflecting on the idea that the idea of nature itself, its definition, is highly unstable, and depending on the field you're in, or the institutional subject you are, or the particular moment you're in, nature could, for a scientist, might be the physical world. For an urban planner, it might be defined by boundaries, a line on a map. For architects, it has sometimes served as a point of origin and authoritative knowledge, like the primitive hut. We need architecture because we can't exist in nature. I think so wonderful about the residency in the book is that throughout its different chapters and writings and forms of representation, you can see that everybody is coming with a different definition of nature, and really trying to articulate that. I've asked you to maybe also bring us back to the book and bring us back to materials in the book, particularly the types of images that we see. So again, this is a residency that does have the word nature, art, and habitat in it, but has invited a quite interdisciplinary group of fellows. And as these people come together and think about the work they do, and then think about the ways they represent that work in a thing like a book, they, of course, are selecting the kinds of images, whether they're technical or artistic. And I found that variety to be highly interesting to think about as a way of close reading. So I've asked each of you to pick an image, and maybe speak to it as a reflection to close out the evening.
I have the first, yes, because that's the image. You notice that the book is it has a component of visual material that is extremely rich, but it's also there are variations. There are photos that are taken during the workshop, work of artists, there are technical drawings, there are the sections, the transect. So, it was an interesting query, Gia, the idea of one image. It's all? Yeah, one image. And so I looked at the book and I said, which image is the most, which pages? What do you want to say? And I think I want to say something about, as I mentioned before, about the creation of this community. There is one sentence that I wish to quote. And you see people in action in this image, and they are doing something, projecting or thinking. They stay, they take a breath, then they observe, and then they proceed. So all these different phases. And at a certain moment in one of the chapters, creativity, which I think it's the way to interpret these two pages, creativity is a powerful tool of freedom and consciousness. With consciousness, in my opinion, comes also the curiosity. And artists, through personal field work, in the ideation and community engagement, generate questions to responses to our greatest contemporary environmental challenges. This is really, of course, in my opinion, the aim not only of the residency, but the work of NAHR. And so, what do I see in this page? I see the work of one architect on your left, top, and architects are part of NAHR, but they are not unique in NAHR. Though this is a group of architects, it's what I found interesting, for me, it's this community with so many diverse interests. And you look at the image and you think, nothing is happening here. And you look more closely, and I invite you, and you see that at a certain moment, in the middle of this land, there are traces of an action. The traces of an action are two geometrical figures, a kind of square and a square within a square in a certain way. And this is an action of, appropriating the nature, but also respecting or working with the nature. And this is one of the aspects that I think NAHR takes in. And the very similar situation on the other page, where in fact, someone, a human, is looking to a work of artist on paper. And the artist, again, is thinking with this drawing about arts in public space. And we are on a street. So the artist occupies the nature of the city, the public space, while on the other side, the artist, the architect, is occupying in a certain way nature with a gesture. And I conclude, my little concern about this observation and notation. You see two examples of people gathering in Valtaleggio. It's one of the workshop. Circle, it's the usual figures of this workshop. I noticed, and you notice, go through the book, many times, you see the resident in a circle. What does it mean? They want to find their center, they need the centrality. Is the nature their center? Those are questions that, ideas and consideration that I had when I selected this page. I don't know who is the next. Deborah.
So this is an image from the water chapter, and it's both a mapping of a delta that over time has transformed. I don't know how well you can see the photographs on the right, but it's a way of a society accommodating an inhabitation of that edge between land and water, and making practical use of living in an area that's both wet and dry in a cyclical way. And the reason I chose this image is that one of the things that happens at the residency, one of the things that I appreciate about my companions here is the emphasis on seeing, looking hard, seeing deeply, not taking the first thing that you see for granted, but looking again. And this is from Kelly Shannon, who's a landscape architect who taught here for a while at USC. She puts a great emphasis on mapping and photographing, repeatedly going back to a landscape and mapping and photographing a landscape. And it also tells a historical story. Any place you go in the world, there's modern water systems, but there's also remnants of ancient water systems that supported populations in ways that were extremely creative. So this idea of close observation and close mapping was really my point in choosing this picture. It meant a lot to me. Unfortunately, it should be much larger for you to see it, but you'll have to look at it.
And it's another lie, right?
This is mine. I have chosen this. It's a roof, and I thought it's for all of us that are architects, and I appreciate an unusual roof, the uniqueness of each stone that is made with. It's very rare by now. Our ancient roofs, very expensive by today economics measures to build these roofs, but are roofs that last 3 times the time that we think of a regular roof today. Yet it depends on a quarry, because it's a very specific stone that exists in a very small area of the Alps. So it makes me think of circular economy, something that today in architecture we speak about a lot, materiality, where material comes from and goes to, and how we can optimize our resources and how much they are connected to the place where we build. And their beauty in a way that is timeless, and the aesthetic that as architects we are drawn to. These are typical of the valley, but they teach a different lesson, I think, today that connects also to the 2025 topic, which is minerals, and takes us back to rocks, but from a microscopic level. So we will be able to look at these roofs again, thinking of what they are composed of and by. So that's it.
I want to say something. A little surprise. Yesterday we did our choice of the pages, and then by pure chance, Ilaria and I talked, and we find out that we had selected the same page. Why? Serendipity or what? How will you call it? Because both were taken by the idea also of how much there is the aspect of craft, and craft is also an aspect of nature. And so basically, probably, I mean, it's also our shared culture. For us, this craftsmanship, this quality of working with this material, but also the sense of tactility, the hands. So we find out on that, and then we had no fight. We said, okay, one of us would select another one, and I almost came immediately with this idea of the community and the Transect and my page. But it also tells you something about who our people are. I mean, it's not that we live together every single day. Sometimes we don't see each other for weeks and weeks and weeks, besides the 9 o'clock.
That's good. I think that's a really good segue though into these pieces. So I cheated a little bit. I did add a couple more images. So these are two different artists. Well, one is an artist, the other one is a geographer. So on the left side, you see the work of two artists, a pair of artists that came to Valparaiso to work on this. And I think also too, what happens is that the topic I think for some might be so too broad. I think sometimes for them to kind of really think about what they're actually going to produce, and so they really take the time when they're at the Valparaiso to slow down a bit and start to reflect on what it is that they should engage and how they should engage that. So they don't always necessarily come out with the ideas of this is what I'm going to generate. So I think this is a really good example of this, where the two artists started to look at the way birds migrate into that area, and also the fact that that was a resource in terms of hunting for food, that all of these little towers that you see behind them were used to actually hunt birds. So they used this as a way to kind of inspire their work, and they started to create this piece that's called Weird Entanglement, which is basically something that you're able to immerse yourself in. So it's a participatory type of installation where you're able to take these nets that are covering their faces and use that as a way to kind of look through that in a different perspective and really start to kind of engage other elements that let you reflect back on birds and the culture of birds and what that means to the valley and how it's used there. But it's a way that they also engage their own work, which is weaving. And so in this case, I think they did bring in some material of their own, or they found the material there, but it's something that they were able to then stitch back into the way that they really think about their body of work. And then on the right side is the work by a geographer who was actually a fellow in San Ynez. And so in this case, it was actually using some of the technology that they have in their own practice or education. So they're using scans to really look at the geography and the ecosystems around a certain area in a certain valley. And in this case, starting to also examine the quality of life in some of these regions where some of the creatures exist, some of the birds, and how they start to kind of organize themselves based on these different criteria, what is actually habitable, what's not habitable, and really starting to look at the different ways of thinking about how we look at ecosystems. So I think this also kind of reflects a little bit to what I was talking about earlier, the fact that you're able to zoom in and zoom out so deliberately in the way that you're researching or practicing, or even the way that you're starting to represent the material that I think is necessary for you to start to really be provocative with these ideas in general. So I like this this way of thinking too, where you have artists that are doing something very deliberate, and also researchers, scientists, geographers that are doing also something quite meaningful, impactful, and also quite aesthetically viable.
Thank you. I think this is such a great image to close that out in the ways that it's showing you a highly technological gaze of land and nature. And then on the left, a very embodied experience of the artist trying to move through the landscape, through their own particular human senses as a way of understanding the topic, and speaks really fantastically to the ways that NAHR, as the book and the residency, is really trying to activate and invite creativity and creative processes with alongside scientific engagements of these ideas. I think it's a good time to close out the conversation. Thank you for the invitation and for this wonderful evening. In a circle on the circular table, and please help yourself to the drinks and the food. And thank you, LA Forum. Please consider joining as a member if you are not already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.